Hello. I hope you've all enjoyed your breakout sessions. We now draw the day to a close with a presentation from Jeff Ward, Vice President of Ebix, who will discuss where tax meets technology. If I could ask you all to begin filling out your feedback forms, which are in your agenda packs, for collection at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. Okay, so fill out your feedback forms. Come along. Right, good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to start with an apology. You've had a long day. Hopefully it's been a fruitful and productive day, informative and everything else. It's beginning to get dark and we're on the downhill slope. And now, through no fault of your own, you've got an IT guy standing between you and your drinks. Where are your drinks? What's going on here? There we are, there are your drinks. Right, okay. So, and it's really not fair, but I'm here and you've got no choice. So, I think before you head for the exit screaming for sanctuary, I think you're probably worth sparing a thought for Mike and his team, who've done a fantastic job of setting up this conference, something apparently they've done for many, many years. It's quite tricky getting a speaker for the last slot. I mean, ideally you really need a comedian, but then Mike's very reasonable fees would probably have to go up quite a lot if you wanted to get Jack D here once a year. The alternative is, of course, you find somebody from your own industry to carry on talking about fiscal and regs, but then you'll have been doing that all day, and there's probably only so much the body can take, which means that you have to find somebody from the outside, which of course is a challenge, because you need to find somebody who's going to talk about something hopefully interesting related to the subject matter. That's potentially tricky, because I could be about to talk about migratory patterns of Arctic terns or something like that, or worse still, I could be talking about information technology. Not everybody's cup of tea, I think it's fair to say. So here we go. We'll see how we go from here. Now, I do electronic trading. Well, I don't personally do electronic trading. My company does electronic trading. We work in the London insurance market, Lloyd's, the company's market, etc., and we work in a number of markets abroad. I like to call it the global reinsurance and large commercial market, to try and differentiate it from other types of insurance, such as general insurance and life. Don't know if that's the right moniker to give it, but it's the one I use. On the face of it, what I do isn't necessarily related to what you do, so my challenge for the next 20 minutes is to try and come up with a tenuous link between the two, so you can score me at the end. Right, so we have potentially incompatible things that we do. My world is all about what goes on at the front of the transaction and trying to improve the process, and of course your world is all about what happens back at the back end of the transaction, dealing with the fallout from that and paying the taxes. So is there a link? Well, I think there may be. Right. So first of all, if I may, I'd just like to spend a couple of minutes talking about my company and what we do. So here comes the shameless marketing. Now's the time, by the way, where you need to fill out your forms. So Ebix doesn't stand for anything, stands for Ebix. What do we do? We're a global software corporation. We specialize in the insurance world. We have about 30 offices throughout the world in 10 different countries. We like electronic trading in insurance. It's kind of what we specialize in, as a result of which we run platforms in North America, Singapore, the UK, where else? Brazil, and Australasia, and we trade well over $100 billion a year of premium on our platforms. Now, most of that is in the general insurance and life space, but we're beginning to make progress in this London insurance market as well, and I'm going to share with you a little bit of that journey in the next few minutes. Okay? What else can I say about us? Oh, that's pretty much it. Right, so in London here, we run a platform called the Ebix Exchange. Now, what does Ebix Exchange do? It's essentially, oh, that's nice, it's worked well on this, EBX. Essentially, it's a platform that joins brokers and carriers together. If you think about, it's a little bit like eBay, I suppose. It's out there in the cloud, and we join up buyers and sellers so that they can do insurance and reinsurance business. I've long given up trying to put the names of the customers on there, because we currently have 35 broking firms, including Willis, Marsh, Aon, and all the other big ones, and 95, I think, underwriting firms using it. So I've gone down to using colours now, yellow for the carriers and green for the brokers, unless you're colourblind, in which case they're the red ones. So, here we go. Right, that's all about us, so that's the marketing pitch over. So, let's get back to the theme. This is the theme, Lloyd's. By that, really, I mean the whole of the London insurance market. But this picture here, which you may have seen before, is the Lloyd's insurance market circa 1688, when it all started. Now, 1688 is a reasonably long time ago. We're very blasé in Europe about things being old, and we're quite used to things being old. When I talk to my American colleagues in Atlanta, where we're headquartered, they struggle with much over 150 years, and that's old to them. So let's just stop and think. This is when the insurance market started, Lloyd's. It was in a coffee shop run by a chap called Edward Lloyd, and he had his name on the door, so it was the Lloyd's coffee shop. Luckily for all of us, I think the globalization of coffee shops hadn't quite got a hold back in 1688, or we might all be working in the Starbucks insurance market or Costas of London. So how long ago really was this? It was a staggeringly long time ago. 17th century, James II was on the throne, 22 years after the Great Fire of London. It was in the Baroque period, so Bach was only 3 years old. Right? That's how old the London insurance market is. It predates the Industrial Revolution by 100 years. It also predates the Constitution of America by 100 years. So this is, I think it's fair to say, a very, very well-established insurance market. It also has some very, very well-established working practices, many of which would be quite familiar now to people from 325 years ago. So what's the important part of this picture? I'm quite fond of the dog in the bottom left-hand corner. It lacks artistic merit, perhaps, but the important part of the picture really are the people. It's always been a people market, it's been a face-to-face interaction market, and it still very much is. So that's quite an important part of the theme. If we sort of update ourselves by 325 years and have a look at it now, the Lloyd's building obviously has slightly changed. There's still a coffee shop inside, not open to the general public. And of course, if we look inside it, it's full of people. That's probably not a very busy day in Lloyd's. It does get extremely crowded in there sometimes. What's the key there? People. They're all doing much the same sort of job that they were doing 325 years ago. I do contend that if somebody took the trouble to invent time travel, you might be able to take one of the 325-year-old Lloyd's practitioners and bring them into this market. And once they got over the issue of clothing, you would probably find that they could underwrite or broker business in pretty much the same way as they used to. So that's inside Lloyd's. Now, the important part of the way we do business in the global, large commercial and reinsurance world is that largely it's face-to-face negotiation. There is no concept of a remote broke. It is done face-to-face. People sit down, intellect to intellect, sweat on the brow, whites of the eyes stuff, and negotiate contracts. These are complicated contracts, most of them. They do take a lot of negotiation. This, in many ways, is the market's greatest strength. We have intellects within the broker and the underwriter community. We have the ability to understand highly complex global risks and programs, and we're able to price them using actuarial support and various other things very effectively. It's also one of the greatest weaknesses because this face-to-face negotiation revolves around paper, quite considerable volumes of it. Contracts are written on paper, albeit by word processors. They're scribbled on by people during the negotiation process. And the end result of this is that we have quite a large army of technicians and back office support people, underwriters, assistants, and so on and so forth, sorting out the mess that this process yields. It's very, very different, of course, from our cousins in the general insurance world. In the general insurance world, you have very easy to quantify risks, lives, cars, houses. These things can be quantified in data terms. It's quite easy to put a value on a car once you know its make, the age of the driver, the colour of the car, and whether it's kept in the garage overnight. It's not quite so easy to price an oil rig. So I do get quite irritated when people say, well, we should be able to put these computerized insurance quotation systems into our market, because fundamentally it's not going to happen, right? It will be a long time, if ever, before we can use this sort of technology. I don't think there's very much place for the computer entrepreneur, the internet entrepreneurs, and the futurologists, and they do tip up from time to time in the market and tell us that we're a bunch of backward Neanderthals, and it's not really right. It's not. That's not to say we can't do anything about our markets' inefficiencies. It's not that we can't help people work more efficiently, but we just can't use that sort of technology. So, what's the essential problem? It's this. It's we work with information. We don't really work with data, right? We have files of information. We have large documents carrying information. Information and data are two completely different things, as I'm sure you're all well aware. You can key data into a website and get an insurance quote quite easily. We work with information. We work with large descriptions of risks, and when it comes to the claims, we have page after page of describing the claim. If you have a motor claim, it's fairly easy. You fill in a box that says that the tree jumped out in front of you, you hit the brakes, but you still hit the tree. So that's a very, very easy piece of data. You can probably even codify that. You can't do the same for an oil rig that's on fire or for an aeroplane that's crashed. It requires a great deal more information. Turning this into data is where we get into all of our problems, because especially on a complex risk that's underwritten by multiple underwriting organizations, this information is mistranscribed into various different versions of the data. So everyone has the wrong information on their systems, and so we get reconciliation problems and all sorts of issues when it comes to settlement. Okay, where do we go from here? Right, so this is how it's been for, ever. I started in the market in 1989, relatively recently, by London market standards. I'd come out of an environment where technology was fairly commonplace. I'd been working in foreign exchange banking for a few years. So I'd seen computerized dealing rooms, which we had then, and you had touchscreen systems and buy dollars, sell sterling telephone systems. It was all very modern. So it was with some excitement that I was asked to go and work in the insurance market to look at a data exchange project between a large broking firm two large broking firms and an underwriting firm, who wanted then to start doing electronic trading. So, wonderful, I thought I'll come and do that. So on the first day I was shown around the underwriting room of this very, very large London market underwriter, who had approximately 25 underwriters in a room with lots of brokers, very, very hushed environment. I think they were underwriting something like £500 million worth of sterling was their premium income back then. It was quite a sizable organisation. But there was not a single computer in that computer room, not one. It was all lovely wooden desks with lovely leather sort of blotters and stuff like that, and nothing else. So I sort of casually inquired as the IT director at the time, well, where are all the computers? And he said, oh no, they don't have them in here. If they want to get some statistics, for example, if they want to renew a risk and they want to see how last year's performed, they pick up the phone and they speak to that little girl there, and she's in a little glass box at the end, and she's cramped into this glass box, and she's got the only computer on the ground floor, and she would read them back the underwriting result, and then the underwriter would make the decision. Unfortunately, given the data quality at the time, they would probably been better off asking the cat, on the basis that the data in the system was really not reliable to make underwriting decisions on. Now, we have as a market come on a long way since then. There's without question of doubt, we do have much better data quality, we do have systems, but there's an awful long way to go. So we developed back in 1989 a system to do this electronic data exchange, and by 1992 we had it live, and so we thought, we've got it cracked. Yes, this is a huge celebration. We've got the market where we want them. We're going to have electronic data trading in this market within months. I think we probably slightly misestimated that. This market doesn't adopt change quickly. In fact, I've given up using snail's pace and glacial and come really to the conclusion that it adopts change at sort of plate tectonics speed. Continental drift. We all know continental drift exists, but none of us can see it happening, and I think this is largely the situation with technological change in the London market. It is going on, but it is going on extremely slowly. So it's taken us quite some time, the last 24 years of my career, to see slowly the adoption of some technologies, some of which are very, very new, very brand new technology. Others are fundamentally based on what was available 25 years ago, but are really only beginning to see adoption now. So, we've got some things going. There's a number of areas like electronic claims, electronic placing, electronic endorsements, and electronic accounting settlement, which I'll cover off in a little bit more detail in a minute. And these are finally beginning to get traction. Given that some are actually not that new technology, it's a little bit odd trying to work out why people now are starting to adopt them. There's a number of possible reasons. Clearly, every market could say that there's a younger generation in the market, and this is no different. There is a younger generation in the market. Some of these guys are coming out of university equipped with actuarial qualifications or mathematics and statistical qualifications. They're finding their way into underwriting. So they're very, very good with a spreadsheet. They're perfectly happy to publish their lives on Facebook, use LinkedIn, and they probably buy their goods off Amazon and eBay. So they're very, very used to modern technology. The theory is that these people are slowly influencing the market. I'm not entirely sure that's a particularly good argument, I have to say, because I've met many people my age or older who are perfectly happy with technology, and I've met many young people who aren't. So I'm not too sure, but it might be a reason. Another reason is us technologists are maybe now offering people stuff that they want, rather than developing something and then trying to find, you develop the solution first and then you try and find the problem for it. Maybe that's an argument. The internet is, of course, much, much quicker than it ever used to be. I mean, it didn't exist 25 years ago at all. Now, back then, if you had a 16K modem, you were able to do pretty much all there was. But, of course, you couldn't download a 4 megabyte picture of a burning oil rig. That's for certain. All this pictorial information and large files we have could not have been transferred between brokers and underwriters in those days, which you can, obviously, in a blink of an eye now. And also the practitioners themselves, I think they've finally got the hang of it, that we're not trying to put them out of a job. It's very flattering to think that somebody could possibly think that we could develop a system that would put them out of a job, but it's, of course, absolute nonsense. There's no way we can develop software that would ever put an underwriter or a broker out of business. What we're trying to do, and what we have always been trying to do, was to make their process more inefficient, so they can get the data accurately and share it amongst themselves. I think on balance, though, probably one of the most persuasive reasons why people are now beginning to adopt technology is good old Dr. Seuss, the green eggs and ham principle. For 20-odd years, we've been saying, try them, and finally, some people are starting to try this technology, and they've found out that they actually rather like it after all. It does not put them out of a job. It has actually delivered them some value, and they are actually seeing that it's a worthwhile investment. It's a very, very slow process. So let's have a quick look at some of the market initiatives that have been running and what they're actually doing. The first one is electronic claim files. Now, I don't know why I've got a picture here of a guy with a suitcase for electronic claim files, but for those of you who've seen the way that the London market used to operate, very often claim brokers would be weighed down with enormous piles of paper. Huge reports, loss adjusters reports, and various other things. And some of them used to carry around pull-along suitcases. Now, all of that has gone in the last 10 years, pretty much. Why? Because of the ECF system, the electronic claim file system. Now, what that does, it's a document repository. Think of your C drive on your computer, just much, much bigger. It sits in the middle of the market, and it allows brokers to publish claims information to the underwriters. So they don't have to take it with them. They put it in one place, and the underwriter can read it at their convenience on their computer. It's probably been around for about 9 years. It took quite some while in gestation. Nobody wanted to use it. Everybody was horribly against it. It probably took 2 or 3 years for it to start being used properly and well by all of the market, and now all of a sudden we've got 200 broking firms using it, 100 plus underwriting firms using it, and you could not take it away from them even if you tried. As it happens, quite spectacularly, it crashed a few months ago, and all hell broke loose. It was down for probably the best part of a week. And the market was, I think it's fair to say, in turmoil. It's probably reasonable to say that it was a bad week to give up sniffing glue. What's he doing over there? Right. It was very much chaos. Now, that's quite odd. You have a system that nobody wanted. You have a few years of sort of fitful adoption and sort of grudging acceptance of this technology. And then within a couple of years, it is so important to everybody's lives that you cannot take it away from them. Right? Now that's a sort of repeatable cycle, actually. You've probably seen this yourselves with email. Right? Email. 30 years ago, email didn't exist, and did anybody need it? Of course they didn't. Yeah, we had fax machines and they were absolutely fine, or we had, we could post things in the post, and everyone was perfectly happy with it. And then some geek comes along and says, well, you want this wonderful email thing? You can send people messages and they'll reply to you straight away. And you think, do I need this? No, my life can carry on without it. It took a little while to gain a hold, and now it is so fundamental to the way we all work. If you try to take it away for a few days, never mind a week, it would be utter chaos. And this tends to be what happens with technological change. And ECF, the electronic claim file situation, is very much, I think, a case in point. Other initiatives we've got going in the market, electronic placing. So there's a nice full Lloyd's. Electronic placing and its cousin, electronic endorsements. This is all about trying to support the electronic process, the manual process, the face-to-face process, with some electronics, so that the data can be delivered to the parties seamlessly, so that the workflow can be controlled, so that contract certainty can be ensured during the placing process, and then when everybody gets their final documentation, the risk is bound, everybody has the same version of the truth. Again, placing's been around as a concept for a good 10 years. It's had several false starts. It's now beginning to get some traction. We've got about 40 broking firms in the market using it, and I would say, give or take, 90 odd underwriting firms using it. Not for all of their business, absolutely not, but this is certainly on the ascendant. The last one, electronic accounting and settlement. Now, invoicing. It's also called EBOT, and it's also called Ruschlikon. Anybody who live in Switzerland here? Yes, it's a small town in Switzerland. Long story, but the project name is the Ruschlikon project. What that does is it allows the broker to communicate premium and claim technical accounts and treaty statements with the underwriters, and have the underwriters agree those electronically, and then they can what's called straight-through process the information, which means that you can take the information from the broker's system and get it into the underwriter system without it touching the sides. That means that you can synchronize the ledgers between the broker and the underwriter and get rid of all of the reconciliation errors and other issues that you will have if you're using manual paper processes or spreadsheets and all these other ways of getting data around. You can get rid of those, and you can have a synchronized view of the market. Reconciliation errors, all of those issues, late payments, everything that follows incorrect transaction information just disappears. So the Ruschlikon initiative, the accounting initiative, is really very much bringing me to the sort of punchline of this rather rambling discussion. It's this system here that conveys all of the tax information between the broker and the underwriter. The e-accounting system has, in glorious Technicolor data detail within it, all of the necessary information for the broker to be able to define where the taxes are, what their location, the value, the calculation mechanisms, and everything else, and convey those to the underwriter. Now, at the moment, all of that information is clearly being filled in by hand by the broking firms using the techniques that they currently adopt. And this is where I think that we may have a crossover between my world of electronic placing and your world of IPT, VAT, parafiscal charges, and fire brigade charges. I think this is where we are. If we can get, during the placing process, this information filled in, then whilst the risk is being negotiated, before it's even bound, the underwriter can have a good idea on the screen of exactly how much net premium this deal is actually going to earn them, and how much the gross premium cost is actually going to be to the end insured. And that would take us a giant leap forward. Beyond that, the minute they bind the information, all this data, they bind the risk, all this data and information can be transferred seamlessly between the broker and the underwriter. So everybody then has the same version of the truth. Now, whether you think this is a worthwhile pursuit, I'll obviously leave that to you. But I do believe that there's quite a lot of people in this room who could actually benefit from electronic trading, even if you never actually do any of it yourselves. Thank you.